Hey, happy Friday. This week, ASML had its secrets stolen in China, OnePlus released a controversial new battery, and Android got a controversial new privacy upgrade. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by Morning Brew. Okay, this week we start the brief with the Oppo Find N2 Flip finally getting its international launch in London. This is Oppo's very exciting answer to the Galaxy Z Flip 4 with a much bigger cover display on the front and a much less visible crease as well. The launch pricing of £849 or about 1,000 freedom bucks is fairly competitive with the Flip 4 as well, and I'm very happy that Samsung finally has some real foldable competition. Next, Huawei launched a weird smartwatch with earbuds built right in, called the Huawei Watch Buds. I can't decide if this is a terrible or a great idea, but at £449, it certainly is not a cheap one. Also this week, apparently Apple has pushed back the launch of its mixed reality headset from April to June, setting it to launch at WWDC as it apparently needs more work. Boo. Next, Geekbench 6 was released this week for use on all operating systems except for iOS, and this is its first big update since 2019, offering significantly more realistic testing scenarios. And then Qualcomm also launched their new X75 modems for phones this week too, which is likely to come to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. It is supposed to offer 20% efficiency improvements and a 25% reduction in physical size, so 5G can now maybe become a little bit less of a pain to use. Also this week, an autonomous F-16 fighter jet has now completed 17 hours of flight testing for the US Department of Defense. Obviously within limits, but yeesh, that's kind of a dystopia right there, and it might also make it hard to cast anyone for the next Top Gun movie. And then YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki steps down after 25 years at Google and 9 years at YouTube. Weirdly, the company did not choose MKBHD to replace her, surprisingly, but instead a longtime Google executive called Neil Mohan for now. Oh well. And to cap off the brief, we'll also talk about how the Pixel is apparently getting about 50% of its components from Samsung, including its screen, chip, wireless modems, memory, and more. We'll talk about that in my podcast, Friday Chill Out, which you can watch or listen to right now on Nebula, or a day later on the weekend if you're not a Nebula subscriber yet. Links to both are down in the description. Alright, my first story of the week is going to be Dutch chip equipment giant ASML having some sensitive data stolen in China. If you don't know, ASML is the only company in the world making advanced EUV lithography machines, which are crucial for making high-end chips, and the data that was stolen was probably directly related to those very machines. The company first disclosed this theft in its annual report, and it didn't say much, just noting that it, quote, experienced unauthorized misappropriation of data relating to proprietary technology by a now former employee in China. Then further reports suggested that the former employee stole data from an internal system called Teamcenter, which stores technical info for product development and collaboration. With China officially banned from buying most of that equipment from ASML, I guess the pressure to perform espionage is higher than ever. ASML did say that the stolen data will not be detrimental to its business, but at the same time, they also noted that some export control regulations may have been violated, so it's all a bit murky. This is the second time in 2 years that ASML's annual report said that data was stolen by Chinese-related interests, with accusations leveled at Beijing-based tech firm Dongfang Jingyuan Electron over intellectual property theft last year, and ASML also said that it experienced more cyber attacks all over the place too. Given that China desperately needs these technologies to have any chance at building a chip industry of their own, I bet these attempts will not stop anytime soon. Okay, for my second story of the week, let's talk about the OnePlus Pad and its encrypted battery, apparently. Okay, so OnePlus unveiled its Android tablet the other way and quietly mentioned in the fine print that, quote, the battery has been especially encrypted for safety purposes. Please go to an official OnePlus service center to repair your battery or to get a genuine replacement battery. As you might expect, this upset quite a few people, including people who commented on my YouTube videos for me to cover this topic, and yeah, I'm kind of torn on the issue. So OnePlus, and also Oppo of course, have developed completely custom charging technologies that I covered on the channel in the past, like SuperVOOC, that include a lot of custom things like fancy dual cell batteries, special controlling chips, thermal solutions, etc. that allow them to charge way faster than their competition. you absolutely should not replace any parts of this system with a random off-the-shelf component, and, well, the reality is that blocking such repairs is actually kind of a necessary safety practice. The real problem comes from the fact that these components are pretty hard to find in many places. The OnePlus service centers mentioned in the company's documents, for example, do not exist in many countries that OnePlus is in, for example, the US. Now, random Reddit users have suggested that anybody can swap batteries in if they can find genuine parts, so this is not a hard lock, but those parts are not easy to find, and this issue is more of a philosophical one overall. On the one hand, completely custom designs like these allow for super advanced stuff. Like, these companies can fast charge phones under 30 minutes while getting less hot than regular chargers. Meanwhile, on the other hand, this is, of course, a real hindrance to repairability. I personally think that it's okay for these custom solutions to exist for people who want them, but people should buy these products consciously knowing that that's kind of a trade-off that they're going to be making, and OnePlus and Oppo definitely should be making their components more widely available. Okay, and for my third story of the week, Google started rolling out their new and very controversial Privacy Sandbox for Android, which could be a huge deal and could completely reshape how online advertising works. So a version of this framework has already been in testing on Chrome for a while now, but it is now starting to roll out to a small percentage of Android 13 devices too, and if you are eligible, you get a notification that you can opt in or out from. And before we get to the juicy controversy, let's talk about how this system would actually work. So in the past, apps that wanted to show ads typically included a so-called SDK from someone like Google or Facebook, basically a mini app inside their app that allowed an ad company to track what you did inside that app. And then that SDK had access to the device's advertising ID, so they could then connect what you did across apps and to try to get you to buy that t-shirt that they decided was just the right thing that you should wear. Apple famously allowed users to outright block that ID access, but Google, of course, can't quite do that. I mean, they earn like almost $300 billion a year from knowing every dirty little secret that you have and monetizing it, so they needed a solution that would let them have a privacy cake and also kind of eat that. And this is what they came up with. So under the new system, Google now offers a so-called SDK runtime, one central sealed-off location where all of the advertising SDKs go instead of being inside each individual app. And because they are confined, they can't track literally everything that you do directly. The Android system does the tracking on the device itself using machine learning to figure out your interests and your activities. Like maybe you like sneakers or you use the Spotify app or something similar. The SDKs can summarize those in a way that theoretically should not be personally identifiable, but could provide advertisers with enough information to place relevant ads. On top of that, the Privacy Sandbox system would also track when a user actually clicks on an ad and maybe buys something and reports that back to the advertisers as well. And depending on who you ask, this is either terrible for your privacy and a clearly anti-competitive move, or kind of a pragmatic trade-off. On the one hand, the Privacy Sandbox builds user tracking right into the operating system and the web browser itself, which just on its own is kind of a crazy thought. And if Google takes over all the tracking and the ad intelligence, other browsers and other advertisers might have a hard time competing, which is something that regulators are already really concerned about. On the other hand, if you believe that advertising, and by extension tracking, is just a necessary evil for providing free services on scale, which is something that humans really want anyway, then this might be a less terrible way of achieving that. Doing all the tracking and all the sensitive data processing on the device itself instead of letting anyone put an SDK into the app and track anything that you do and upload it to whatever cloud that they want to do whatever that they want for as long as they want, well, that is a significantly better solution. And on top of just processing stuff locally, the user can also have more opt-out options if the tracking is controlled by their own device. And given that Google is literally right now being sued by the DOJ for monopolistic behavior about their online ad technologies, the company is understandably extremely careful in trying to position this system as not overly favoring themselves either. It's too early to tell whether Google really wants to build a system that is fair and open to competition, but it's clear that they're trying to walk a lot of really fine lines here. Now, another story that caught my attention this week is a breakthrough for male birth control. Researchers have apparently developed pills that can temporarily immobilize sperm, showing promising results in lab tests, and I learned about this story, like many others, in Morning Brew, the free daily newsletter that I read every day of the week. Morning Brew covers tech, business, and whatever else is relevant with great writing, stats, and graphics and more in a fun and simple format that's kind of similar in approach and depth to what I do here on the show. It is witty to the point that it even makes me chuckle a few times a day. The topics are well chosen, so I always learn something new from them, and the writing also really gets to the point too, so it doesn't drag out for too long. Like the name implies, I like to read it right after I wake up, as I find that getting a bit of thoughtful writing is a better way to start the day than jumping straight into doom scrolling on social media. Signing up takes just 15 seconds and it's free, so there's really no reason not to sign up. Click on the link in the description and you'll be all set.